3 of my dad's Boogerdog Dogman experiences. Dear Scary Stories NYC, on Father's Day this year, I find myself thinking back on my father and his times. My dad was very old school. He farmed, he hunted, he fixed cars, and he claimed to have any number of experiences with a creature that had to have been a dogman, but which he called a boogerdog. This was years and years before I ever heard the term dogman, and I don't know why my father would have made this stuff up. The boogerdog, according to my daddy, was distinctly different from the wood booger, which was what we would call a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. I saw one of those with him once on a boat trip that we made into the swampland to see my grandfather shortly before he passed on. That was a terrifying day for me as a 13-year-old boy. Daddy told me to lie down in the boat and to pray silently when we first spotted that wood booger on the shoreline. After we got past it in peace, he told me that sometimes those things will throw boulders at your boat to try to sink you if they think you're acting too proud of yourself. You have to be submissive when you run into a wood booger, he told me, although even that is sometimes not enough if they happen to be in a bad mood on that day. The entire ride home, I kept low out of fear, and my daddy laughed at me the whole way. When we got back, he told Mama that her husband and daughter were home. I didn't appreciate that. Daddy expected me to grow up faster than I was able to, while telling me all the time that he was being overprotective. I really think each generation of us is weaker than the previous one, because my daddy always seemed like some kind of superhero compared to me and my generation. When my father would talk to me about the boogerdog, he would ask me how scared I was by the wood booger Bigfoot that we had seen that day alongside the river. I would answer that I was as scared as I could imagine ever being. Then Daddy would say each time he ran into a booger dog, he was 10 times as scared as when he encountered the wood booger. When you see a wood booger, you can try and be submissive. You can try to sort of reason with him, Daddy explained. But when you're walking into a booger dog scenario, you just have to focus on survival or escape. There is no reasoning with a booger dog. Daddy lived his life on the outskirts of Texarkana. His younger days were east of there near Garland City in Arkansas. His final 25 years when he was semi-retired were spent west of Texarkana in a house near Redwater, Texas. I believe all of these stories date back to his days in a part of Arkansas that's less than a half-hour's drive to Fouke. If you don't remember, Fouke is the place they shot that documentary movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek. I don't mean any of the sequels or remakes, I'm talking about the original from the early 70s. When I saw that, I was out of college and an adult already, and I tried to take my father to see it too because it was about the wood boogers. Daddy refused to go, saying wood boogers are to be avoided. He liked to tell his stories, but he didn't want to hear anyone else's stories. They would just get him unnerved. It wasn't entertaining for him because he lived in the country, and I think he was afraid those things would reach in through the window, just like they do in that movie. It just hit too close to home for him, I guess. Anyway, here are some of Daddy's boogerdog stories told as well as I can remember. There are other stories too, but these are the ones I remember the best. I'm going to try to tell them from his point of view, writing as him. These are not actually in his own words, though, as Daddy never wrote any of this stuff down. I'll be paraphrasing throughout, but it should make sense if you pretend this is him talking. Number 1. The boogerdog that chased me down a hill. Way back when I was just married, before I turned 20 years old, I came face to face with my first boogerdog. I nearly died of fright, but I survived. That boogerdog sure showed me who was boss, though. It happened like this. I was out hunting as usual. It was hot out in the middle of the summer when the bugs are extra thick and the air is even thicker. I saw some varmint's tail coming out from under a bush. It wasn't any tail I was familiar with, and I didn't know what was in there. I could tell it was facing away from me, but that was it. I thought it might be a dog, so I whistled to see if it would react. If it was something wild, I was going to try and bag it for dinner, but if it was someone's dog, obviously I would want to spare its life. So like I said, I whistled, and the tail disappeared. Then the bush got all disturbed, like something was going to come on out of there. I held my rifle at the ready and waited to see what was going to happen next. I emptied my head of all fear, but also of all hunger and anticipation. If you let your stomach guide you, then you'll fire on anything. On the other hand, if you let your fear rule you, then you might miss your shot when you get a clear one. So I just watched, and I just waited. But instead of some critter moving left or right, or toward me or away, something rose upward. No lie, something started coming up out of that bush, and I backed off a whole lot really quickly. I was afraid it was going to be some other guy aiming right at my head. So I tore off about 20 or 30 feet away, got myself into a good defensive position behind a thick tree, and I peeked my head out. Well, what I saw made me feel dizzy. I felt like I was seeing something from the bottom of a bottle of bad moonshine. I blinked my eyes, and I pinched myself, but that thing was still there. So what did I see? I'll tell you, it looked like a living nightmare. It looked like God put that thing on this here earth just to be scary. Every way this thing could seem terrifying, it did so in spades. It had evil-looking eyes. It had an evil, prehistoric-looking mouth. It was like a dog, but it stood up like a booger. It had blood in its fur, so you could tell it wasn't groomed right. It seemed ill in the head, and that made it 10 times more scary. He was the last critter in the world that I wanted to pick any kind of fight with, and I wanted to let it know that somehow. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't dealing with no wood booger, which is probably part man. This was part dog and part devil. That's what this thing was. I backed away, continuing to look at it, but I pointed my rifle at the ground. The ammo I had in there wasn't going to take that thing down anyway. I had been out hunting small game. So I moved away, thinking that would make it leave me alone. Instead, that Boogerdog started barking like he lost his mind, and the next thing I knew, I saw him charging out of that bush, running toward me like he was in the Olympics or something. I tore back down that hill to the bottom where I had come into it. I was thinking that once we reached ground level, that Boogerdog was going to be running even faster. Once we got out of the wooded part back onto the path, I was going to have to do something to slow that thing down. So when I landed on the dirt, I turned around and I got myself down, taking aim at the woods behind me. When the giant critter would eventually run out, I was going to have to fire on him with what I had loaded, then take off running again. My hope was that I'd be able to slow him down a little bit and enable my getaway in the process. Well, that Boogerdog never came out of those woods. I don't know how far back he stopped chasing me. It was possible he was right inside that tree line looking out at me from someplace I couldn't see. Or he might have only fake charged me to get me running. Stayed quiet for a long time. But when I started hearing the insects again, I took my chance to get on out of there. Story 2. The Boogerdog that ruined my hunting stand. I spent the good part of an entire summer fixing up a hunting blind that I was sharing with my buddy Ned. He could use it on even-numbered days, and I had it on odd-numbered days. It was located in a prime spot, and we spent 6 or 7 weeks cutting branches out of the trees around it to improve the sight lines. We cut a few whole trees down, in fact, so it was about the best hunting blind that had ever been created. We could look in any direction, even behind us, and we'd usually be able to see whatever was down on the ground better than it could see us way up there on top of that thing. We had this really sophisticated, we thought, protection down on the bottom in case something like a bear spotted us up there, or a wood booger, or a cat. You know, something that knew how to climb up a tree. We cut some notches on the bottom part of the old tree we built it onto. Then about 20 feet off the ground, we had a barbed wire and metal fence kind of thing set up that could only be opened by one of the 2 keys that Ned and I owned. Past that was a ladder that we'd built right into it, so the rest of the long way up was far easier. Nothing had been able to get past our defenses, and so that hunting blind was as secure as it was useful. We felt like mad scientists, me and Ned. So one late afternoon, I was thinking about climbing on down out of there and going home because it was starting to get dark. I did a double take because I thought I saw a man wearing a gray fur coat heading my way. When I caught sight of him a second time, I saw that this guy's fur was his own fur, and his glowing eyes told me right off that I was dealing with a Boogerdog. Some of them, when it gets dark, their eyes glow like some kind of demon from hell. I seen one once that had red glowing eyes, but this one had eyes glowing this sort of off-white color, which is more common, at least in my experience. I had only seen, I think, 2 Boogerdogs in my life up to that point, and both times for less than a second before I had started running. I had a false sense of security up in that blind, because I had never been messed with when I was in it before, so I took the opportunity to outright stare at that dog-headed thing. It looked like a wolf, except it stood up like a man, and must have been 6.5 feet tall. Staring at that thing was a big mistake. Boogerdogs have that same sense that we have. They can tell when someone's staring at them. Don't you know that critter looked straight up at me in my tree blind, and his eyes narrowed in hate. Even though I still felt safe up there, I'll tell you a chill went through me. After that thing's dog eyes zoomed in, it let out a high-pitched barking like it had just seen a ghost. The next thing I knew, it had run straight toward me, pushing trees and whatnot out of its way as it made a beeline for my tree stand. That was the first time I feared for my life in that hunting blind, as I didn't know if the thing was going to be strong enough and crazy enough to get through my defenses down below me. I could see clearly that the thing had hands like a giant raccoon, complete with opposable thumbs. Raccoons, as we all know, are excellent climbers, and this booger looked stronger than 4 men put together. Well, the thing tore into the tree trunk at the bottom, and I really couldn't see too well what he was doing at first. I had a good view of everything except what was directly beneath me, to be honest. I had a few weeks earlier set up a mirror in a nearby tree, pointed down to the base for security reasons, but leaves had grown up around it, blocking the view, and I had been too lazy and too overconfident to shimmy up that tree to fix it. I could hear the big beast doing something destructive down there. I just couldn't tell exactly what. I didn't hear any metallic noises, though, so I wasn't feeling like he was getting very far up that bottom level. Even though that thing was packed with muscle and had hands like humans or apes or raccoons, which can all climb very well, I don't think that Boogerdog had his brains wired in the correct way to climb. This creature may be some kind of a dog that is cursed in some way. Like a werewolf is a cursed man in the stories, I think this Boogerdog starts off as a dog, or a canine at least. It thinks like a dog so much that the idea of climbing just doesn't occur to it, because that idea doesn't occur to dogs. A cat will claw its way up almost anything. but the dog will remain on the ground barking up at that cat. In the same way, I think that the Boogerdog doesn't really understand yet all the different ways that his clawed hands could be useful to him. This is why I say that these creatures are less human than wood boogers, and why I am more afraid of them than anything else in nature. They are more destructive than they need to be, and they don't always need a reason to do something terrible. The Boogerdog is the only thing besides man that I know of that sometimes kills just because it can. Everything else kills for food or for self-preservation, but the Boogerdog will also kill for sport, or out of anger, or just to amuse itself. So, I was shaking all over, stuck in my hunting blind, listening to that Boogerdog trying to pull the entire thing down on top of itself. The idiotic thing got fixated on me and just wouldn't let up. Hours went by. I wanted to get out of there and go home, but I couldn't figure a way out. I could have risked unhooking myself from my seat and then tried to climb out on limbs and reach another tree, but even if I made it, that dog-headed thing would just follow me over there and trap me all over again. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there, trying not to have a heart attack from absolute fear. It wasn't until the first rays of light in the morning came that I could hear the insane beast stop doing whatever he was doing and walk away to whatever hell on earth he called home. I waited until he was long gone before lifting my stiff and achy bones on out of there and climbing on down. When I got through my locked metal gate, I saw that the rest of the way down had been torn to shreds by the creature. Not just tree bark, but shreds of the wood itself were all over the ground all around, and the trunk was half the thickness it had been before that booger noticed me up there, looking down on it. He hadn't succeeded in getting me down out of there, but he had seriously destabilized the base of that hunting blind and ruined almost 2 months of work by 2 grown men trying to create the greatest hunting blind in history. So let that be another lesson to you. If you see a Boogerdog, you better look away fast. Otherwise, he'll feel you looking at him, and he'll take it as a personal offense. Story 3. The Boogerdog that dug up my yard. It was these next 2 incidents that convinced me and your mother to pull up roots and move to Texas, as these made it all too personal and too dangerous. This was in the late 60s when you were away at college. That was back when your mother's cat Snookums passed on, God rest her soul. You weren't around, so you probably don't know how sad it made the poor woman. She wouldn't let me get her a new cat for near on a year out of respect for Snookums, and she made me bury her in the garden, where the cat liked to play and sleep. So the next night after the funeral, we heard strange sounds coming from the backyard. When we checked on it through a window, we were horrified to see one of them Boogerdogs digging up the poor cat's grave. That's another thing. I think these are cursed dogs turned into hellish creatures and not just a normal breed of predator. The desire to pull dead things out of graves, that's something a ghoul would do. It just seems unnatural and wrong to me. I made your mother go back to bed and I went out back to make noise and scare that thing off. I put a big stone slab over the grave to keep out the predators. You remember that stone. It was right in the middle of your mother's garden, and a constant reminder of her loss. My temper toward the Boogerdog had reached a boiling point, and the next thing that happened just pushed it all too far for us to put up with it any longer. Your mother was washing the dishes in the kitchen one night when that dog-headed freak came right up to the window and stared right in at her. She screamed and broke some dishes and the thing ran off, but that was the last straw. They had gotten so brazen as to come right up to us, inches away, and just stare into our home like they were the landlord or something. They had decided there were no boundaries between us and them, and it was only a matter of time before there was going to be violence, or maybe something a lot worse than that. This was when we contacted real estate people and put our old place on the market. we were in our new home near Redwater before Christmas. It's only 20 or 25 miles west of Garland City, but it's on the other side of Texarkana, and I just don't think booger dogs are as plentiful over here. At least, we've been mostly left alone since our move. And that ends that story. I do remember one more Dogman story my father used to tell, but that one is pretty violent, and it made my daddy cry to tell it. If you want that story, just let me know. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed my retelling of 3 of my daddy's Boogerdog Dogman experiences. If you'd like to hear that violent story, we have it on our secret uncensored story tonight for our channel members and paid subscribers only. You can join for as little as 99 cents a month, although obviously you get greater perks the higher the level you join. Speaking of which, I'm a bust a rhyme for today's executive producer. We love you all, both hers and Himberly's, and now we praise our EP Kimberly. Kim is so cool, she's a panic. She's truly a karma mechanic. Please join me in thanking our newest executive producer, Kimberly Plays with Karma, for making this episode possible. In exchange, she gets to see our secret Sunday uncensored stories, as well as over 15 hours of archived uncensored episodes, which I'm working on adding a 4th chapter to hopefully this week. You too can gain access to all this and more by either joining our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or else by doing what Kimberly did and clicking the join link under this or any of our videos. Now, here's PQ Ribber as Dr. Death to explain it all in greater detail. Doctor?
Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it. You can become a channel member by clicking the join link below. Then you can check our community page to find the links to 10 hours or more of secret, uncensored Dogman stories too wild to be told on this channel. Your other option is to join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That's Peter's homemade club, where he will personally email you the links as well as occasional secret club messages. You may also be included as an executive producer in a future episode. Do you have a scary experience you want to tell us about? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or else call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LESS-SCARY. The machine cuts off every few minutes, so if you have a long story, please keep calling back and we'll piece it together later on. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.